After 12 years of marriage, my husband threw me out of our home in a rage, screaming that I was useless and pathetic, not knowing that 3 days earlier I had inherited $280 million from my great-aunt's tech empire. As he celebrated his freedom with his drinking buddies, laughing about finally getting rid of his, quote, emotional mess of a wife, my great-aunt's estate lawyer was driving to find me with documents that would change everything. When I walked into his victory party with the inheritance papers, watching his face drain of color as he realized what he'd thrown away, I knew my transformation from broken housewife to tech mogul had truly begun. Before we dive back in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if this story resonates with you, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is something truly special I can't wait to share. I still remember the exact shade of crimson the sunset painted across the Denver skyline that evening, bleeding through our penthouse windows like a warning I was too blind to see. The Rocky Mountains stood majestic in the distance, their peaks catching the last light before darkness would consume everything I thought I knew about my life. Before we continue this journey together, tell us where you're watching from in the comments below, and if this story resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I have something even more incredible to share. The kind of perfect autumn evening that tricks you into believing your carefully constructed world is as stable as those ancient peaks. I was standing in our marble kitchen, the one Damien had insisted we renovate last year, with its imported Italian countertops and commercial-grade appliances that I barely knew how to use. The espresso machine he'd bought for nearly $8,000 hummed in the background, a monument to excess I'd never requested. I was staring at my reflection in the black granite surface, touching the concealer I'd carefully applied to hide the bruise on my cheek from 2 nights ago, when Damien's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "Celeste, get in here, now!" My stomach clenched with familiar dread. That tone, cold, controlled, dangerous, meant I had done something wrong again. At 34, I had spent the last decade walking on eggshells, my confidence systematically stripped away until I could barely recognize the woman I used to be. The successful marketing coordinator who had once pitched campaigns to Fortune 500 companies now jumped at shadows, constantly apologizing for existing. I smoothed my silk blouse with trembling fingers and walked toward his study, my heels clicking against the hardwood floors that never quite felt warm despite the luxury. Damien stood behind his mahogany desk, still wearing his tailored suit from the law firm, his green eyes blazing with the fury I knew so well. "Look at this," he snarled, holding up his phone. "Look at what your emotional breakdown cost me today." The screen showed a group photo from last week's charity gala, the one where I'd excused myself to the bathroom when his colleagues' wives started their usual passive-aggressive comments about my sensitivity. In the image, I was notably absent from the partner's spouse's group shot. "Miranda Ashford asked me where my wife disappeared to," he continued, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea how that made me look? Like I can't even control my own wife at a simple social function." "I was just feeling overwhelmed," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "The lights were so bright, and everyone was overwhelmed?" He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "You're always overwhelmed, Celeste. Always crying, always hiding, always embarrassing me. You used to be beautiful, confident. Now look at you, a pathetic shell who can't even handle a dinner party." The words hit me like physical blows. He was right, wasn't he? I had become everything he said. Weak, emotional, a liability. The woman who had once commanded boardrooms now cowered in her own home. "I'm sorry," I managed, tears threatening to spill. "I'll do better, I promise." "No, you won't," he said with chilling finality. "Because you're not capable of better. You're broken, Celeste. Damaged goods." He moved around the desk, and instinctively I stepped backward. In the early years, his anger had been verbal. Lately, it had evolved. "Pack your things," he said quietly, the calm worse than shouting. "I want you out. Tonight." "Damien, please." Now the story moves toward its real conclusion, so stay with us and don't skip any part and don't fast forward. The next developments are incredibly compelling. Out! He roared, his fist slamming into the wall beside my head. I flinched, pressing myself against the door frame as plaster rained down. I'm done pretending this marriage is salvageable. I'm done being held back by your weakness. My legs nearly gave out. Where will I go? I don't care. Your sister's apartment, a hotel, the street. Figure it out, like a real adult for once in your pathetic life. Through my tears, I saw him clearly for perhaps the first time in years. The handsome face that had once charmed me now twisted with contempt. The ambitious attorney I'd fallen for had become a monster who fed on my diminished self-worth. You have 2 hours, he continued, already turning away as if I'd ceased to exist. Leave your key on the counter, and Celeste, don't come crawling back. I'm finally free of you. As I stumbled toward our bedroom, my former bedroom, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Through my tears, I almost ignored it. Almost. Mrs. Celeste Hartwell, this is Victoria Sterling from Sterling & Associates Estate Law. I've been trying to reach you regarding your great-aunt Penelope's estate. It's urgent that we meet immediately. There are documents you need to see. I sank onto the bed I'd shared with a man who'd just thrown me away like garbage, holding a phone call that would change everything, though I didn't know it yet. In 2 hours, I would be homeless, heartbroken, and apparently inheriting something from a great aunt I barely remembered. What I didn't know was that Aunt Penelope had built a tech empire in Silicon Valley, had been watching my marriage deteriorate from afar, and had left me everything, along with a plan for revenge that would make Damien's worst nightmares pale in comparison. But first, I had to survive the next 2 hours. It took a lot of care and time to prepare and narrate this for you, so if you're enjoying it, a quick subscribe really helps and means the world to us. All right, let's get back to it. 2 hours. That's all the time Damien gave me to pack up 12 years of my life and disappear from the penthouse that had been my prison disguised as paradise. I stood in our walk-in closet, hands shaking as I pulled designer dresses from hangers, each piece a reminder of the woman I used to be before he systematically destroyed my confidence. The Chanel suit I'd worn to my last job interview before he convinced me to quit. We don't need your little marketing salary, he'd said. I make enough for both of us. The Valentino gown from our 5th anniversary, when he still pretended to love me in public. The countless outfits I'd bought hoping to please him, to be pretty enough, perfect enough, quiet enough. My hands trembled as I folded each garment, tears streaming down my face and smudging the concealer that hid his latest mark. How had I become this broken shell of a person? I caught my reflection in the full-length mirror and barely recognized myself. Hollow-eyed, fragile, like a ghost haunting my own life. The sound of his laughter echoed from downstairs. He was already on the phone, probably calling his law partner Bradley to celebrate his newfound freedom. Finally got rid of the dead weight, I could imagine him saying. Time to find a woman who actually enhances my career instead of sabotaging it. I threw toiletries into a smaller bag, my movements becoming frantic as the 2-hour deadline approached. Where would I go? My sister Elena lived in a cramped studio apartment in Boulder, barely making ends meet as a graduate student. I had no job, no recent work experience, no real friends. Damien had isolated me from everyone over the years, claiming they were bad influences or jealous of our success. My phone buzzed again, with another call from that estate lawyer, Victoria Sterling. I declined it, unable to deal with whatever bureaucratic nonsense she needed. Some distant relative's will could wait. I was being thrown out of my home by the man who'd promised to love and protect me. Celeste. Damien's voice boomed from downstairs. Your time's almost up. I grabbed my jewelry box with shaking hands, the one my grandmother had given me before she passed. Inside were the few pieces that had been mine before marriage: a simple pearl necklace, small diamond earrings, my college class ring. Everything else, the expensive tennis bracelets and designer watches, had been his choices, his taste, his control over even how I adorned myself. As I packed, memories flooded back of how this had all started. Damian Blackstone had been the golden boy of Morrison and Associates, the most prestigious law firm in Denver. Handsome, charismatic, ambitious. And I'd been the beautiful marketing coordinator who caught his eye at a corporate event. He'd pursued me relentlessly, showering me with attention and expensive dinners, making me feel like the most special woman in the world. The first year of marriage had been intoxicating. He'd loved showing me off at firm events, introducing me as his gorgeous wife to senior partners and clients. I'd felt cherished, protected, adored. When had the compliments turned to criticisms? When had, "You look stunning tonight," become, "Is that really what you're wearing?" It had been so gradual, a comment about my laugh being too loud at dinner parties, suggestions that I was too emotional for certain social situations, encouragement to quit my job because successful men's wives don't need to work. Each small surrender had seemed reasonable at the time, even loving. He was taking care of me, wasn't he? But somewhere along the way, taking care had become controlling, loving had become diminishing, protection had become isolation. 15 minutes, he yelled, and I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I zipped up my suitcases with desperate speed, grabbing the few personal photos he'd allowed me to keep displayed, mostly ones that included him, of course. The picture of me with my parents before they died in that car accident 5 years ago. The snapshot of Elena and me on our last sister trip before Damian decided such excursions were wasteful. My phone rang again, Victoria Sterling, persistent as ever. This time I answered, if only to stop the incessant calling. "Mrs. Hartwell, thank goodness." The woman's voice was warm but urgent. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. We need to meet immediately regarding your great-aunt Penelope Morrison's estate." "I'm sorry, but this really isn't a good time," I said, my voice breaking. I'm in the middle of moving." We're now approaching the story's true conclusion, so stick with us, and don't just skip or speed up the story. What happens next is absolutely riveting. "Mrs. Hartwell, I understand you're busy, but this cannot wait. Your aunt's estate is substantial, and there are time-sensitive legal matters that require your immediate attention. Where are you located? I can come to you." "I don't even remember having a great-aunt Penelope," I said honestly, shoving my laptop into its case. "Are you sure you have the right person?" "Penelope Morrison, your mother's aunt, she moved to California decades ago, built quite a successful technology company. She was very specific in her will about finding you when the time came." Through my tears and panic, something tugged at my memory. Mom had mentioned her once or twice, the mysterious aunt who'd moved west and made something of herself. But that had been years ago, before my parents died, before Damian consumed my entire world. "I really can't deal with this right now," I whispered, hearing his footsteps getting closer. "I'm being evicted from my home and I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight." There was a pause on the line. "Mrs. Hartwell, what I have to tell you will solve that problem, and many others. Please, just give me an address. Anywhere. I'll meet you there within the hour." "Time's up!" Damian appeared in the doorway, his face cold with satisfaction. He looked at my packed bags with cruel amusement. "Finally accepting reality, I see. Good. Maybe there's hope for you yet." I ended the call and stood, wheeling my suitcase toward the door. As I passed him, he grabbed my arm with enough force to leave another bruise. "Leave the credit cards," he said quietly. "All of them. You won't be needing them anymore." With numb fingers, I removed the platinum cards from my wallet, the ones with my name on them that he controlled completely. He watched with satisfaction as I placed them on the dresser. "And Celeste? If you think about trying to take half my assets in some pathetic divorce attempt, remember that I'm the lawyer here. I know exactly how to protect what's mine." He released my arm and walked away, dismissing me like I was nothing more than an annoying interruption in his evening. I heard him call out as I reached the top of the stairs. "Bradley, You free for drinks? I've got some excellent news to celebrate. I dragged my suitcases down the marble staircase, each step echoing in the empty foyer. At the bottom, I placed my keys on the hall table as instructed and walked toward the door of the penthouse that had been my cage for so many years. As I stepped into the hallway, homeless and heartbroken, my phone rang once more. Victoria Sterling again. This time, I answered on the first ring. "Tell me where to meet you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And whatever my great-aunt left me, I hope it's enough for a hotel room tonight." What I didn't know was that Penelope Morrison had left me $280 million, and a plan that would make Damien's cruelest nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. But first, I had to figure out how to survive the night. I sat in the sterile lobby of the Grand View Hotel, my suitcases at my feet like wounded soldiers after a lost battle. The cheapest room I could find in downtown Denver still cost more than I wanted to spend from my meager personal savings account, the small emergency fund I'd managed to keep hidden from Damien over the years. $300 for one night in a place that smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and broken dreams. The lobby's harsh fluorescent lights made everything look sickly, including my reflection in the scratched chrome elevator doors. My carefully applied makeup had long since streaked down my cheeks, and my silk blouse was wrinkled from frantically packing. I looked exactly like what I was, a woman who'd just been thrown away like garbage. Other guests walked past me with purpose, business travelers and tourists who belonged somewhere, who had plans and destinations. I envied their certainty, their apparent control over their own lives. When had I become so helpless? When had I lost the ability to navigate the world without someone else's permission? My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Tried calling you. Everything okay? You sounded weird in your voicemail." I'd left her a rambling message an hour ago, trying to explain that I might need to stay with her for a few days without admitting the full humiliation of what had happened. How do you tell your younger sister that your successful lawyer husband had thrown you out for being too emotional, too weak, too much of an embarrassment to his pristine career? Before I could respond to Elena, Victoria Sterling walked through the hotel's revolving door, and I recognized her immediately, despite never having met her before. She moved with the kind of confident purpose I'd once possessed, before Damien had convinced me that my instincts were wrong, my opinions invalid, my very existence an inconvenience. Victoria was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant bun and sharp blue eyes behind designer glasses. She wore a navy suit that spoke of success and authority, everything I used to embody in my own career before I'd sacrificed it all for a man who'd ultimately discarded me anyway. "Celeste Hartwell?" she asked, approaching with a warm smile that seemed genuine. "I'm Victoria Sterling. Thank you for agreeing to meet me on such short notice." I stood awkwardly, smoothing my wrinkled skirt. "I'm sorry about my appearance. It's been a difficult day." "Please, don't apologize. Let's find somewhere private to talk." She glanced around the lobby with its scattered guests and front desk staff. "Do you have a room here?" "I just checked in," I admitted, feeling ashamed of my circumstances. "Room 847. "Perfect. Shall we head up? What I have to discuss with you requires complete privacy." In the elevator, Victoria studied me with kind but assessing eyes. "May I ask what happened today? You mentioned being evicted from your home." The question opened floodgates I'd been desperately trying to keep closed. "My husband threw me out," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He said I was broken, damaged goods, an embarrassment to his career." Victoria's expression hardened. "I see. And this husband of yours, what does he do?" "He's a partner at Morrison and Associates. Corporate law. Very successful, very respected." Even now, discarded and humiliated, I found myself defending Damien's reputation. The conditioning ran that deep. "Ah," Victoria said, and something in her tone suggested she knew exactly the type of man I'd described. "And you? What did you do before marriage?" "I was a marketing coordinator at Brennan Communications. I worked on campaigns for major clients, managed accounts worth millions." The words felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a foreign language I'd once been fluent in. But Damien thought it was best if I focused on supporting his career instead. The elevator dinged at the 8th floor, and we walked down the narrow hallway to my room. Inside, the space was exactly as depressing as I'd expected. A queen bed with a garish floral comforter, a small desk, and a window that looked out at the parking garage. I gestured to the room's only chair while I perched on the edge of the bed. Victoria opened her briefcase and removed a thick manila folder embossed with her law firm's logo. "Celeste, before we begin, I need you to understand that everything I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change your life. Are you prepared for that?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. My life just fundamentally changed when my husband threw me out with 2 hours' notice. I'm homeless, jobless, and apparently worthless. How much worse could it get? "Actually," Victoria said with a slight smile, "it's about to get immeasurably better. Let me tell you about your great-aunt Penelope Morrison." She opened the folder and withdrew an old photograph. The black-and-white image showed a woman in her 30s with dark hair and determined eyes, standing in front of what appeared to be an office building. She looked familiar in a way that tugged at distant memories. This was taken in 1987 when Penelope founded Morrison Technologies in Palo Alto. She was 28 years old, had just left an unhappy marriage to an abusive husband, and had nothing but a revolutionary idea for computer software and an unshakable belief in her own abilities. I studied the photograph more closely. There was something about the woman's posture, the set of her jaw, that reminded me of my mother. I remember Mom mentioning her occasionally. She said Aunt Penelope was the family rebel who ran off to California. "She did more than run off," Victoria continued. "She built one of the most successful technology companies on the West Coast. Morrison Technologies specialized in data security software for major corporations. By the time she retired in 2019, the company was worth over $400 million. The number seemed impossible, abstract. I'd never known anyone with that kind of wealth. That's incredible. Good for her." Penelope never remarried, never had children. She watched her family from afar, including you. She knew about your marriage to Damien Blackstone. Something cold settled in my stomach. She knew about Damien? Victoria's expression grew grave. "Celeste, your aunt had been having you quietly monitored for the past 3 years. Not invasively, just periodic check-ins through a private investigation firm. She was concerned about reports of your husband's behavior, your increasing isolation, your apparent unhappiness." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "She was having me watched?" "She was protecting you," Victoria corrected gently. Penelope recognized the signs because she had lived them herself. Her first husband was also a successful professional man who systematically destroyed her confidence and self-worth. She escaped with nothing but her determination to rebuild herself. I thought about my own gradual transformation from confident professional to anxious shadow. The way Damien had slowly convinced me that I was too sensitive, too emotional, too weak to function in the real world. Had it been that obvious to an outsider? 3 months ago, when Penelope's health began declining rapidly due to pancreatic cancer, she made the decision to finalize her will, Victoria continued. "She left you everything, Celeste. The company, her personal assets, her real estate portfolio, all of it." The words hung in the air like something tangible I could touch, but couldn't quite grasp. "Everything?" Morrison Technologies was sold to a larger corporation in 2020 for $320 million. Combined with her other investments and properties, your inheritance totals approximately $280 million. I stared at Victoria, waiting for the punchline, the catch, the revelation, that this was all some elaborate mistake. But her expression remained serious, compassionate, and utterly sincere. "I don't understand," I said slowly. "Why me? We barely knew each other." "Because she saw herself in you," Victoria replied simply. "A brilliant woman trapped by a man who made her believe she was worthless. She wanted to give you what she'd given herself, the resources to escape, rebuild, and become who you were meant to be." My hands started shaking again, but this time it wasn't from fear or humiliation. It was from something I hadn't felt in years: possibility. The story is finally reaching its real ending, so please stay with us and watch at normal speed. You won't want to miss what's coming because it gets really interesting from here. "There's more," Victoria added, pulling out another document. "Penelope included specific instructions for how she wanted you to handle your situation. She called it Operation Phoenix, rising from the ashes of a destroyed life to become something magnificent." As she spoke, I could hear Damien's laughter echoing from the penthouse, celebrating his freedom from his pathetic wife. He had no idea that the woman he'd thrown away was now worth more than his entire law firm. The broken emotional shell he'd discarded was about to become the most powerful woman he'd ever encountered. Victoria reached into her briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope marked with elegant script. "For Celeste, open when ready." The paper felt heavy in my trembling hands. Expensive stationery that spoke of serious intentions. Inside was a handwritten letter in flowing cursive, along with what appeared to be detailed typed instructions. "Your aunt wanted you to read this yourself," Victoria said softly. "She spent weeks crafting every word." I unfolded the letter and immediately felt transported by the intimate tone of someone speaking directly to my soul. "My dearest Celeste, if you're reading this, then my worst fears about your marriage have come to pass, and my greatest hope, that you would find the strength to reclaim your life, is about to begin. I never contacted you directly because I knew that men like Damien monitor everything, control every relationship, every conversation. But I've been watching, dear girl, and I've seen what he's done to you. The confident marketing executive who once pitched campaigns to Fortune 500 companies has been systematically broken down into a fearful shadow. I know because I lived it too. My first husband, Richard, was remarkably similar to your Damien. Charming, successful, convinced that his love gave him ownership over my soul. He made me believe I was lucky to have him, that without his guidance I was nothing but an emotional mess, destined for failure. It took me 3 years to understand that I wasn't crazy. I was being deliberately destroyed. The money I'm leaving you isn't charity, sweetheart. It's ammunition. It's the power to choose your own path without fear of poverty, without dependence on anyone who would diminish you. But more importantly, it's the opportunity to show your husband exactly what he threw away. In the typed pages, you'll find my suggestions for what I call Operation Phoenix. Not revenge, mind you, but justice. Not destruction, but reconstruction. The plan will allow you to rise from the ashes he created while demonstrating to him, and to everyone who watched him discard you, what true power looks like. You are not broken, Celeste. You are not too emotional, too sensitive, or too anything. You are a brilliant woman who was systematically convinced otherwise by a small man who feared your potential. Show him what a mistake he made. With all my love and faith in your strength, Aunt Penelope. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I read, but for the first time all day, they weren't tears of pain or humiliation. They were tears of recognition, a feeling seen and understood by someone who had walked this path before me. I looked up at Victoria, who was watching me with gentle patience. "She really understood," I whispered. "She understood completely," Victoria confirmed. "Penelope spent 15 years rebuilding herself after her escape. She wanted to compress that timeline for you, to give you resources that would accelerate your transformation." I turned to the typed pages, my hands steadying as I read. The document was incredibly detailed, almost like a business plan for reclaiming my life. Penelope had outlined everything from immediate practical steps to long-term strategic moves. Phase 1. Immediate security and separation. Secure temporary housing away from Damien's influence. Establish independent financial accounts under maiden name. Document all marital assets and Damien's behavior patterns. Consult with high-powered divorce attorney specializing in cases involving psychological abuse. Begin therapy with specialist in narcissistic abuse recovery. Phase 2. Professional reconstruction. Reestablish professional identity and credentials. Consider acquiring existing marketing firm or starting new company. Leverage inheritance to build legitimate business empire. Document all professional achievements independent of marriage. Phase 3. Strategic positioning. Allow Damien to believe divorce will be simple and favorable to him. Prepare comprehensive case documenting years of emotional abuse and financial control. Position for maximum impact revelation of financial independence. Phase 4. The revelation. Choose moment of maximum public visibility to reveal transformation. Ensure Damien's professional circle witnesses his miscalculation. Demonstrate complete emotional and financial independence. This is incredibly thorough, I said, scanning through pages of specific recommendations, contact information for attorneys and therapists, even suggestions for executive coaching to rebuild my professional confidence. Penelope spent months developing this plan, Victoria explained. She consulted with therapists, business experts, and legal professionals to create a roadmap that would minimize your emotional trauma while maximizing your empowerment. I looked up from the papers, suddenly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. This is real? This is actually happening? It's absolutely real. The initial transfers can begin tomorrow morning. Penelope set up everything to move quickly once activated. Victoria pulled out another document. However, there is one condition she insisted upon. My stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. There was always a catch, always a price to pay. What condition? You must see a therapist who specializes in recovering from narcissistic abuse. Dr. Sarah Chen in Boulder. I have her contact information. Penelope insisted that healing the psychological damage was as important as securing the financial independence. The requirement surprised me. Most wealthy relatives would attach conditions about marriage, children, or business decisions. Penelope had prioritized my mental health. She wanted to ensure you understood that the money was just a tool, Victoria continued. The real transformation has to come from within. You need to rediscover who you were before Damien convinced you that you were worthless. I thought about the woman in the old photograph, standing confidently in front of her new company. She had rebuilt herself from nothing, created an empire through sheer determination and refusal to accept the limitations others tried to impose on her. When can I start? I asked, and Victoria smiled at the first note of determination in my voice. Dr. Chen has been expecting my call. She's cleared space in her schedule for an emergency session tomorrow afternoon. As for the financial aspects, I can begin the initial transfers first thing in the morning. Victoria gathered the papers and handed me copies of everything. Celeste, I want you to understand something important. Your aunt didn't just leave you money. She left you a blueprint for becoming the woman you were always meant to be. But the choice to follow that blueprint is entirely yours. I looked around the depressing hotel room, then back at the documents that represented a complete life transformation. 6 hours ago, I had been a discarded wife with nowhere to go and no resources. Now I was potentially one of the wealthiest women in Colorado, with a detailed plan for rebuilding my life and showing Damien exactly what he had thrown away. What happens tomorrow? I asked. Tomorrow, you begin becoming Celeste Morrison, Victoria said, using my maiden name deliberately. Successful businesswoman, independent entrepreneur, and someone who learned that other people's opinions of her worth are completely irrelevant. As Victoria prepared to leave, she paused at the door. One more thing Penelope wanted me to tell you. She said that Damien's biggest mistake wasn't throwing you out tonight. It was never recognizing what he had in the first place. By the time you're finished transforming yourself, he'll understand exactly what he lost. After Victoria left, I sat alone in the hotel room, surrounded by legal documents and life-changing possibilities. My phone buzzed with another text from Elena, but for the first time, I didn't feel desperate to respond immediately. I had options now. I had power. I had the resources to show Damien Blackstone that the emotional, broken woman he'd discarded was about to become his worst nightmare. Not because I would destroy him, but because I would become everything he never believed I could be. The phoenix was about to rise from the ashes, and he had no idea what was coming. I woke up at 6 a.m. to 17 missed calls from Elena and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. The last one simply read, "Call me now." Something's happening with Damien. My stomach dropped as I dialed her number, remembering that I hadn't responded to any of her messages the night before. She answered on the first ring. "Celeste, thank God. Where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm fine, Elena. I'm at a hotel downtown." "What's going on with Damien?" "He's been calling me since midnight, completely drunk, ranting about how you've finally shown your true colors and that he's free from your pathetic neediness. But here's the weird part. He also keeps asking if I know anything about some lawyer who's been asking questions about your family history." My blood ran cold. Victoria Sterling must have conducted background research before contacting me, and somehow Damien had gotten wind of it. What kind of questions? Something about relatives in California, specifically about an aunt named Penelope Morrison. Celeste, who is Penelope Morrison? And why does Damien sound absolutely terrified when he mentions her name? I closed my eyes, realizing that my carefully planned transformation might be more urgent than I had anticipated. If Damien was already suspicious about family connections and potential resources, I needed to move faster than Penelope's timeline had suggested. "Elena, I need you to listen carefully. Can you meet me this morning? There's something incredible I need to tell you, but I can't discuss it over the phone." 2 hours later, we sat in a quiet corner booth at Riverside Cafe in Boulder, far from Damien's usual haunts. Elena listened with growing amazement as I explained the previous night's revelations, her graduate student budget forgotten as she ordered increasingly expensive coffee drinks to cope with the shock. $280 million? She whispered for the third time. "Celeste, that's not real money, that's fantasy money." "It's very real," I assured her, pulling out copies of the legal documents Victoria had left with me. "And Elena, there's something else. I think Damien already suspects something's changed." I told her about his drunk calls, his questions about Penelope Morrison, his apparent terror at the mention of our great-aunt's name. Elena's expression shifted from amazement to concern. "That's not good," she said slowly. "You know how he gets when he feels threatened or out of control. Remember when you got that job offer from the marketing firm in Seattle? He made your life hell for weeks until you turned it down." The memory was painful but illuminating. Damien's reaction to any threat to his control had always been swift and devastating. He would launch preemptive strikes designed to undermine my confidence and eliminate any possibility of independence. But this time, I had resources he couldn't touch and knowledge he didn't possess. "I'm scared he'll try to have me committed or something," I admitted. "He's been telling people for years that I'm emotionally unstable. If he's desperate enough..." "He wouldn't dare," Elena said fiercely. "He's a respected attorney. He can't just have his wife institutionalized because she inherited money." "Can't he? He has professional connections throughout the legal and medical communities. He could easily find doctors willing to say I'm having a psychotic break, especially if I start talking about hundreds of millions of dollars that nobody can verify yet." My phone rang, interrupting our conversation. Victoria Sterling's name appeared on the screen. "Celeste, we have a problem," Victoria said without preamble. "I've just received a call from Damien Blackstone's law firm. They're asking questions about my contact with you and demanding copies of any legal documents I may have provided." How did they find out about you? I'm not certain, but I suspect our background research into your family triggered some kind of alert. Corporate lawyers like your husband often monitor their spouse's activities more thoroughly than we realized. Elena leaned closer so she could hear the conversation. I put the phone on speaker. What does this mean for the inheritance? I asked. The inheritance is completely secure, Victoria assured me. It's held in irrevocable trusts that predate your marriage. Damien has no legal claim to any of it. However, if he's already suspicious, we need to accelerate our timeline significantly. How significantly? I'm recommending we complete all major transfers today. Full financial independence, secured accounts, and legal protection in place before he can mount any kind of challenge to your mental competency. The phrase sent ice through my veins. Mental competency challenges were exactly what I'd been afraid of. Victoria, can he really try to have me declared incompetent? He can try, but he would need substantial medical evidence and court approval. However, the process itself could be damaging and expensive, even if ultimately unsuccessful. It's better to prevent it entirely by demonstrating your complete financial and legal independence before he can act. Elena grabbed my hand across the table. What do you need us to do? I need Celeste in my office within the hour for signature verification and account establishment. Can you get to downtown Denver immediately? We're on our way, I said, signaling for the check. Now we're reaching the story's actual conclusion. Stay with us and don't skip ahead, because the next part is the most interesting yet. As we drove toward Denver, Elena kept glancing at me with a mixture of concern and admiration. You know what this means, right? She said finally. That my husband is trying to destroy me before I can escape him? No, it means you're already escaping him, and he's terrified. Men like Damien only panic when they realize they're losing control. His drunk calls, his desperate questions about Aunt Penelope. He knows something's changed, even if he doesn't know what. She was right. For 12 years, Damien had controlled every aspect of my life through financial dependence and psychological manipulation. The possibility that I might have resources beyond his reach was probably his worst nightmare. Elena, what if he's right about me? I asked quietly. What if I really am too emotional and unstable to handle this kind of responsibility? Stop! Elena's voice was sharp. That's his voice in your head, not yours. The woman I grew up with was brilliant, confident, and capable of anything she set her mind to. That woman didn't disappear. She was just buried under years of systematic abuse. As we pulled into the parking garage beneath Victoria's office building, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Celeste, this is Dr. Sarah Chen. Victoria Sterling asked me to reach out. I have an opening at 2 p.m. today if you'd like to begin our work together. Recovery from narcissistic abuse takes time, but I want you to know that what you're feeling right now, the fear, the self-doubt, the sense of unreality, is completely normal for someone in your situation. Reading her message, I felt something shift inside me. These weren't coincidences or lucky breaks. Penelope had orchestrated a comprehensive support system, anticipating every obstacle I might face and providing resources to overcome them. Elena, I think I'm about to become someone completely different. Good, she replied firmly. Because the person you've been for the past 12 years isn't who you really are. She's who Damien needed you to be to feel powerful. As we walked toward the elevator that would take me to my new life, I realized that Damien's panic might actually be working in my favor. His desperate attempts to maintain control were forcing me to claim my independence faster than I might have otherwise. He wanted to prevent me from becoming powerful. Instead, he was accelerating my transformation into someone he never believed I could be. The broken, emotional wife he'd discarded was about to become the most formidable opponent he'd ever faced, and he had no idea what was coming. Victoria's office occupied the entire 40th floor of the Millennium Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains. The space exuded the kind of understated luxury that came with handling generational wealth. Persian rugs, original artwork, and furniture that whispered rather than shouted its expense. As Elena and I were escorted through the reception area, I caught glimpses of other clients: tech executives, oil heiresses, and the kind of people who managed money in amounts most people couldn't comprehend. I was about to become one of them. Victoria met us in a conference room where 3 other professionals were already assembled around a mahogany table that could have seated 20. She introduced them rapidly. Marcus Webb, a forensic accountant who specialized in protecting assets from hostile spouses. Jennifer Liu, a privacy expert who helped high-net-worth individuals maintain anonymity. And Robert Torres, a security consultant who looked like he'd stepped out of a corporate thriller. "Before we begin the transfers," Victoria said, settling into her chair with practiced efficiency, "I need you to understand what we've discovered about your husband's activities since last night." Robert Torres opened a tablet and turned it toward me. The screen showed a series of photographs taken from a distance. Damien entering his law firm at midnight. Damien meeting with 2 men I didn't recognize in the parking garage. Damien making animated phone calls while pacing his office. "We've been monitoring his movements since Victoria contacted you," Torres explained in a gravelly voice that suggested years of dealing with dangerous situations. "Your husband isn't just asking casual questions about your aunt. He's hired a private investigation firm to dig into your family history and financial background." My stomach clenched. "He's having me investigated?" "More than that," Marcus Webb interjected, consulting his own files. "He's also contacted 3 psychiatric professionals, ostensibly seeking, quote, guidance about a spouse experiencing what he termed delusional episodes regarding fictitious inheritances." Elena's hand found mine under the table. "He's building a case to have you committed." "It appears so," Victoria said grimly. "Which is why we're accelerating everything. Jennifer, show them what we've prepared." Jennifer Liu slid a folder across the table. Inside were identification documents, credit cards, and banking information, all bearing the name Celeste Morrison. "We've established your complete financial independence under your maiden name," she explained. "New Social Security traces, credit history established through Aunt Penelope's financial network, and most importantly, bank accounts that cannot be accessed or frozen by any court order your husband might obtain." The efficiency was breathtaking and slightly terrifying. In less than 12 hours, these people had created an entirely new identity for me, complete with financial resources that dwarfed anything Damien could touch. "The primary account contains $50 million for immediate use," Marcus added casually, as if he were discussing grocery money. "The remaining assets are distributed across various investment vehicles and trust structures designed to maximize both growth and protection." $50 million for immediate use. The phrase didn't compute. Yesterday I had been worried about affording a hotel room. Today I had access to more money than most people would see in multiple lifetimes. "There's more," Victoria continued, and I wondered how much more shocking news my system could absorb. "Robert's investigation into your husband has revealed some interesting information about his professional activities." Torres consulted his tablet again. "Damien Blackstone has been taking significant financial risks lately. He's borrowed heavily against future partnership profits, invested in several questionable real estate ventures, and most concerning, he's been using firm resources for personal expenses in ways that could constitute embezzlement." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means your husband is not nearly as financially secure as he appears," Marcus replied. "The penthouse, the luxury lifestyle, the expensive cars, it's all leveraged to the breaking point. He's been living on credit and borrowed time." Elena leaned forward. "So when he threw Celeste out, he wasn't just being cruel, he was trying to cut expenses?" "Possibly," Victoria acknowledged, "but more likely, he was positioning himself for what he assumed would be a favorable divorce. By discarding you publicly and establishing a narrative of your instability, he probably expected to avoid significant alimony payments." The cruelty of it took my breath away. Not only had Damien systematically destroyed my self-worth, But he'd also been planning to discard me financially, leaving me with nothing while he maintained his lifestyle with a younger, more compliant partner. "What about his investigation into my family?" I asked. "How much can he actually discover?" Jennifer answered this one. "Under normal circumstances, quite a lot. But we've been working with Penelope's estate lawyers for months to ensure complete privacy. The trust structures are so complex and well protected that even forensic accountants would need months to trace the full scope of your inheritance." However, Robert added with a note of warning, his private investigators are asking the right questions. They're specifically looking for California business connections, technology company ownerships, and any financial transfers that occurred after Penelope Morrison's death. Victoria stood and walked to the windows overlooking the city. "Which brings us to our recommendation. We believe you should disappear." "Disappear?" The word came out as a croak. "Not permanently," she clarified quickly, "but for the next 2 weeks, while we complete the final asset transfers and Jennifer establishes additional privacy protections. We've arranged for you to stay at a private estate in Aspen, completely off the grid. No paper trail, no digital footprint, no way for Damien or his investigators to locate you." Elena spoke up. "What about the therapy sessions? Dr. Chen?" "Dr. Chen has agreed to conduct sessions via secure video conference," Victoria replied. "In fact, she believes removing you from Damien's immediate sphere of influence will accelerate your recovery process." I looked around the table at these professionals who had essentially reorganized my entire existence in the span of a morning. They were offering me not just financial independence, but complete liberation from a man who had controlled every aspect of my life for over a decade. "What happens when I come back?" I asked. "That depends entirely on what you want to happen," Victoria said, returning to her seat. Penelope's final instructions included several scenarios. You could relocate permanently to California and build a new life there. You could return to Denver as Celeste Morrison, successful entrepreneur, and rebuild your professional identity. Or, she paused meaningfully, you could return and demonstrate to your husband exactly what he threw away. The last option sent a thrill through me that I didn't entirely recognize. For 12 years, I had absorbed Damien's contempt, his dismissal, his certainty that I was worthless without his protection and guidance. The possibility of proving him catastrophically wrong was intoxicating. "What would that look like?" I asked. Robert Torres smiled for the first time since I'd met him. "It would look like Damien Blackstone, realizing that the, quote, pathetic emotional mess he discarded is now the most powerful woman in Colorado, and that every person who witnessed him throw you away will also witness your triumphant return." As we prepared to leave for Aspen, Jennifer handed me a secure phone and a credit card with no spending limit. "Your new life begins now," she said simply. Walking toward the elevator, Elena squeezed my arm. "You realize this is like something out of a movie, right? Yesterday you were homeless. Today you're basically a superhero with unlimited resources." But as the elevator descended toward the parking garage, I knew this wasn't really about the money. It was about reclaiming the woman I used to be before Damien convinced me she was worthless. The broken, discarded wife was disappearing. In her place, Celeste Morrison was about to emerge. Now we're reaching the story's actual conclusion. Stay with us, and don't skip ahead because the next part is the most interesting yet. The estate in Aspen was nothing like I had imagined when Victoria mentioned a private retreat. Nestled against the mountainside with sweeping views of snow-capped peaks, the contemporary glass and stone structure seemed to emerge organically from the landscape itself. As our car wound up the private drive, I counted at least 12 bedrooms through the expansive windows, along with what appeared to be a full spa, home theater, and indoor swimming pool. "This belongs to one of Aunt Penelope's former business partners," Elena said, reading from the information packet Victoria had provided. "She made it available for as long as you need." A housekeeper named Maria greeted us at the entrance. explaining that she lived in a separate cottage on the property and would be available for anything I needed while maintaining complete discretion. The main house had been stocked with everything from gourmet food to an entirely new wardrobe in my exact size, all arranged by Jennifer Liu's team. "How did they know my measurements?" I asked, examining the designer clothing hanging in the master suite's walk-in closet. "Penelope had you measured discreetly over a year ago," Maria explained matter-of-factly. She wanted to be prepared for any scenario that might require immediate relocation. The level of planning was almost unsettling. My great-aunt had orchestrated every detail of my potential escape with the precision of a military operation, anticipating needs I hadn't even known I would have. Elena helped me unpack while I tried to process the surreal turn my life had taken. Less than 48 hours ago, I had been cowering in Damien's study while he screamed about my inadequacies. Now I was standing in a multi-million-dollar estate, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly allowance from Damien, preparing for my first video session with a trauma specialist. Dr. Sarah Chen appeared on the secure laptop at exactly 2 o'clock, her kind face filling the screen as she spoke from her Boulder office. She was younger than I had expected, perhaps 40, with a calm presence that immediately put me at ease. "Celeste, I want to start by acknowledging how overwhelming this transition must be," she began. "In my experience, survivors of narcissistic abuse often struggle with sudden empowerment because they've been conditioned to believe they don't deserve it." The word survivors hit me unexpectedly hard. I had never thought of myself as someone who had survived anything, just someone who had failed at marriage. "I'm not sure I qualify as a survivor," I said hesitantly. "I mean, Damien never actually hit me. It wasn't like real abuse." Dr. Chen's expression grew firm. "Celeste, psychological abuse is absolutely real abuse. The systematic destruction of someone's self-worth, the isolation from support systems, the constant criticism designed to make you doubt your own perceptions. These are recognized forms of domestic violence that can be even more damaging than physical abuse because they're harder to identify and escape." Over the next hour, she walked me through concepts I'd never heard of: gaslighting, trauma bonding, learned helplessness. She explained how abusers like Damien systematically broke down their victims' confidence and independence, creating dependency that felt like love, but was actually control. "The woman Damien convinced you that you were emotional, unstable, incapable of functioning independently. That was never real," she said. "That was a carefully constructed fiction designed to keep you trapped. Your Aunt Penelope recognized this because she had experienced the same systematic dismantling of her identity." After the session ended, I sat on the estate's expansive deck, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun set behind the mountains. Elena joined me with 2 cups of tea, settling into the adjacent chair. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Confused," I admitted. "For 12 years, I believed everything Damien told me about myself. Dr. Chen is saying it was all lies, but those lies feel more real than this inheritance, this house, this new identity." "Maybe that's because the lies were repeated every day for over a decade, and this transformation just started," Elena suggested. "Give yourself time to adjust." My secure phone buzzed with a message from Victoria. "Damien has filed a missing person report, claiming you've had a psychotic break and may be dangerous to yourself. Robert's contacts in law enforcement are managing the situation, but he's escalating his search efforts." I showed Elena the message, and her face darkened. "He's really trying to have you declared mentally incompetent." "Dr. Chen warned me about this," I said. "Abusers often escalate their control tactics when they sense their victim is escaping. He's probably terrified that I might have access to resources he doesn't know about." Over the next several days, I settled into a routine that would have been impossible in my previous life. I woke naturally without anxiety about Damien's mood. I chose my own clothes without worrying about his approval. I ate meals when I was hungry rather than according to his schedule. I read books he had dismissed as pointless fiction, and watched movies he had called intellectually inferior. Most importantly, I began working with a business consultant named Rachel Martinez, who connected via video conference from San Francisco. Rachel had been Aunt Penelope's protégé during the final years of Morrison Technologies, and she understood both the business empire I had inherited and the psychological journey I was undertaking. Penelope left very specific instructions about your business education, Rachel explained during our third session. She wanted you to understand not just that you're wealthy, but how to leverage that wealth to build something meaningful. Rachel walked me through the portfolio of companies, real estate investments, and technology patents that now belonged to me. But more than that, she began teaching me how to think like an entrepreneur, rather than a victim. Your husband threw you out because he saw you as a liability, she said bluntly. We're going to transform you into someone he never believed you could become, not for revenge, but for your own empowerment. By the end of the first week, I was having daily sessions with Dr. Chen and business consultations with Rachel. I was reading voraciously, books about business strategy, memoir about women who had overcome abuse, histories of female entrepreneurs who had built empires from nothing. Most importantly, I was beginning to remember who I had been before Damien convinced me I was worthless. Elena stayed for the first few days before returning to Boulder to continue her graduate program, but not before witnessing a conversation that changed everything. During my morning session with Dr. Chen, she asked a question that stopped me cold. Celeste, what do you want to happen when you return to Denver? I thought about Damien's certainty that I would come crawling back, his dismissive laughter when he threw me out, his conviction that I was incapable of surviving without his support and guidance. I want him to see what he threw away, I said slowly, not because I need his approval anymore, but because I want him to understand the magnitude of his mistake. Dr. Chen smiled. That sounds like the beginning of genuine empowerment. You're not seeking his validation. You're planning to demonstrate your independence. That evening, I called Victoria with my decision. I want to return to Denver in 1 week, but I don't want to sneak back quietly. I want to make an entrance that will ensure everyone who witnessed my humiliation also witnesses my transformation. What did you have in mind? Victoria asked, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I want to buy something that will make a statement. Something that will demonstrate exactly what Damien discarded when he threw me out. Any thoughts on what that might be? I looked out at the mountain vista, thinking about power, independence, and the most public way to announce that the broken woman Damien had discarded no longer existed. I want to buy his law firm. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought we had been disconnected. Celeste, Victoria said finally, that's absolutely brilliant. Victoria's laughter echoed through the secure phone line, rich with genuine delight. Celeste, you've just proposed something that would have made your aunt incredibly proud. But buying Morrison & Associates won't be simple. We're talking about one of Denver's most established law firms. Is it possible? I asked, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. A week ago, I would never have imagined myself capable of such an audacious plan. With your resources? Absolutely possible. The question is strategy. Rachel, are you on this call? Rachel Martinez's voice joined from San Francisco. I'm here, and I'm already running preliminary numbers. Morrison & Associates is privately held, with 5 senior partners including your husband. The firm's been struggling financially more than they've made public. Over the next hour, these women who had become my strategic counsel outlined a plan that was both methodical and devastating. Morrison & Associates had been hemorrhaging money due to poor investment decisions and several partners' expensive personal lifestyles, particularly Damien's over-leveraged spending. The senior partners have been quietly seeking an investor or buyer for months, Rachel explained. They just haven't found anyone willing to meet their price while allowing them to maintain control. What if we offered them something they couldn't refuse? I suggested, the idea forming as I spoke. Full purchase price, immediate payment, but with the condition that all current partners retain their positions for a transition period. Victoria's tone grew thoughtful. That would allow you to become the sole owner while keeping Damien completely unaware until the moment you choose to reveal yourself. Exactly. Let him continue thinking he's safe, that his discarded wife is somewhere having a breakdown while he rebuilds his life. Meanwhile, I become his boss. Rachel's keyboard clicked rapidly in the background. The firm is valued at approximately $42 million. With your liquid assets, you could complete this purchase within a week and still have substantial resources for whatever comes next. Dr. Chen, who had been silently listening to the call, finally spoke. Celeste, I want to make sure this decision is coming from a place of empowerment rather than revenge. What's your ultimate goal here? The question made me pause and examine my motivations. Was this about hurting Damien, or about demonstrating my own transformation? I think it's about reclaiming my narrative, I said finally. For 12 years, Damien controlled how I was perceived professionally and socially. He convinced everyone, including me, that I was incompetent, emotionally unstable, and dependent on his success for any social standing. Buying his firm isn't about destroying him. It's about proving that assessment was catastrophically wrong. And when the dust settles, Dr. Chen pressed gently. When the dust settles, I want to build something meaningful. Maybe Morrison & Associates becomes a firm that specializes in representing abuse survivors in divorce proceedings. Maybe it becomes a platform for advocating for women's rights. I don't know yet, but I want the foundation to be solid. Over the next 3 days, Victoria's team worked with supernatural efficiency. They established a shell corporation called Phoenix Acquisitions, hired corporate lawyers from competing firms to handle the negotiations, and began the delicate process of approaching Morrison & Associates senior partners. Meanwhile, Robert Torres provided daily updates on Damien's increasingly frantic activities. He had hired 2 different private investigation firms, contacted hospitals across 3 states claiming I might be in psychiatric distress, and even reached out to several women's shelters asking if they had any record of me. He's convinced you've had a complete mental breakdown, Torres reported during one of our secure video calls. His narrative to colleagues is that you became delusional about inheriting money from a relative who never existed, and he had no choice but to ask you to leave for your own safety. The irony was exquisite. While Damien was telling everyone I was delusional about an inheritance, I was using that exact inheritance to purchase his professional livelihood. Elena visited again for the weekend, bringing updates from Boulder and serving as my sounding board for the increasingly complex emotions this transformation was stirring up. You seem different, she observed as we sat by the estate's fireplace Saturday evening. More centered, I guess. Dr. Chen says that happens when you stop living in a constant state of hypervigilance, I replied. For years, I was always monitoring Damien's mood, trying to anticipate his needs, walking on eggshells to avoid his criticism. Now I wake up and think about what I want to do with my day. Are you nervous about confronting him? I considered the question carefully. I'm nervous about reverting to old patterns, I admitted. Dr. Chen warned me that being around Damien again might trigger automatic responses. The urge to apologize, to minimize myself, to accept his version of reality. We've been working on strategies to maintain my new perspective when I see him again. Sunday afternoon brought the call I had been anticipating. Victoria's voice was triumphant. Phoenix Acquisitions has successfully acquired Morrison & Associates for $41.7 million. The sale closed an hour ago. You now own your husband's law firm. The reality hit me like a physical force. I owned Morrison & Associates. I was Damien's employer, his ultimate authority, the person who controlled his professional fate. When will the partners be informed? I asked. The official announcement goes out Monday morning, Victoria replied. All current staff and partners will receive notice that the firm has been acquired by Phoenix Acquisitions, effective immediately. The new management structure will be announced at a mandatory all-hands meeting Thursday afternoon. And that's when I reveal myself? If you're ready. Rachel has prepared a comprehensive presentation about the firm's new direction under your leadership. You'll be introduced as Celeste Morrison, CEO of Phoenix Acquisitions and new owner of Morrison & Associates. I closed my eyes, imagining Damien's face when he realized that the pathetic, emotionally unstable wife he had discarded now controlled his career, his income, his professional reputation. "There's one more detail," Victoria added. "We've learned that Damien has been planning his own announcement for Friday. Apparently, he's been telling colleagues he's getting engaged to his paralegal, Jennifer Walsh. He was planning to use the firm's conference room for a celebration party. The paralegal, I should have known." The pattern was so predictable. Successful men like Damien didn't stay single long. They moved directly from one controlled relationship to another, preferring younger women who were impressed by their status and too inexperienced to recognize the warning signs. "Let him make his announcement," I said, a plan forming in my mind. "In fact, let him have his engagement party." I think Friday would be the perfect time for Morrison & Associates' new owner to make her inaugural appearance. Elena, who had been listening to my side of the conversation, looked at me with something approaching awe. "You're really going to walk into his engagement party as his new boss?" "I'm going to walk into his engagement party as the woman he never believed I could become," I corrected. "The successful, powerful, independent entrepreneur who built an empire while he was celebrating his freedom from his, quote, emotionally unstable wife." Now we're reaching the story's actual conclusion. Stay with us and don't skip ahead because the next part is the most interesting yet. As I hung up the phone, I realized that somewhere during the past 2 weeks, the broken woman who had been thrown out of her own home had disappeared entirely. In her place stood Celeste Morrison, tech heiress and corporate owner, ready to show Damien Blackstone exactly what he had thrown away. The phoenix was about to rise from the ashes, and he had no idea what was coming. Thursday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the kind of Colorado sunshine that made the mountains look close enough to touch. I stood before the full-length mirror in the estate's master suite, adjusting the collar of my midnight blue power suit, Armani, tailored to perfection by Jennifer Liu's team. The woman staring back at me bore little resemblance to the trembling, tearful creature Damien had thrown out 2 weeks ago. My hair, professionally styled the day before, fell in sleek waves past my shoulders. The makeup was subtle but expertly applied, emphasizing eyes that no longer held fear or uncertainty. Most importantly, I wore an expression I hadn't seen on my own face in years: absolute confidence. "You look like you could buy and sell half of Denver," Elena said from the doorway, where she stood holding 2 cups of coffee. She had driven up from Boulder to be my support system for today's confrontation. "Technically, I probably could," I replied, accepting the coffee with steady hands. "But today I'm only interested in one law firm." The drive to Denver passed in contemplative silence. Victoria's team had arranged for a driver and security detail. Robert Torres insisted on precautions, though he wouldn't specify what kind of reaction he expected from Damien. The familiar skyline appeared ahead of us, and I felt a strange combination of homecoming and conquest. Morrison & Associates occupied floors 35 through 38 of the Sterling Building downtown. As our car pulled into the executive parking garage, I spotted Damien's black BMW in its assigned space. For a moment, my chest tightened with automatic anxiety, the conditioned response of 12 years spent fearing his disapproval. Then I reminded myself, I owned that parking space now. I owned his office, his conference room, his professional future. The anxiety transformed into something else entirely: anticipation. Victoria met me in the lobby, accompanied by Rachel Martinez, who had flown in from San Francisco specifically for this moment. Both women radiated the kind of controlled energy that preceded major corporate maneuvers. "The all-hands meeting is scheduled for 3 o'clock in the main conference room," Victoria informed me as we rode the elevator to the 38th floor. "All partners and staff will be present. Are you ready for this?" "I've been ready for 2 weeks," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my own voice. The executive floor of Morrison & Associates was exactly as I remembered from the few times Damien had brought me to firm events. Polished marble, expensive artwork, and the kind of understated luxury that whispered rather than shouted its success. Several staff members looked up curiously as our group passed, clearly wondering who warranted such an impressive entourage. We were escorted to the corner office that had belonged to the firm's founding partner before his retirement. From behind the massive mahogany desk, I could see directly into Damien's office across the hall. He was there, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, completely absorbed in reviewing what appeared to be case files. He looked exactly the same, handsome, confident, utterly certain of his place in the world. He had no idea his world was about to implode. "Mrs. Morrison," Rachel said formally, using my maiden name for the first time in a professional setting, "would you like to review your presentation materials one final time?" I skimmed through the carefully prepared slides that would introduce me as the new owner of Morrison & Associates. The presentation outlined my background, my vision for the firm's future, and, most importantly, my expectations for all current staff. It was professional, comprehensive, and devastating in its implications for anyone who had underestimated me. At 2:45, staff members began filing into the main conference room. Through the glass walls, I watched familiar faces. Colleagues of Damien's I had met at countless firm events, support staff who had always treated me with polite condescension, and junior associates who had barely acknowledged my existence when I was merely Damien's wife. Damien entered the conference room at exactly 3 o'clock, taking his usual seat near the head of the table. He looked relaxed, even amused, probably assuming this was some routine administrative announcement about the firm's new ownership structure. Jennifer Walsh, his paralegal and apparent fiancée, sat beside him, wearing an engagement ring that caught the light from the windows. "It's time," Victoria said simply. I walked into that conference room with the measured pace of someone who belonged there, who owned every square foot of mahogany and marble. Conversations died as I entered, replaced by curious murmurs and questioning glances. I took my position at the head of the table, Victoria and Rachel flanking me, and looked out at the assembled staff of my new company. My eyes found Damien's face just as recognition dawned. The blood drained from his features so rapidly I thought he might faint. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, then opened again without producing sound. Jennifer looked between us in confusion, clearly trying to understand why her fiancé appeared to be in shock. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "My name is Celeste Morrison, and as of Monday morning, I am the sole owner of Morrison & Associates." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the air conditioning system humming in the background. 32 legal professionals sat frozen, trying to process the impossible reality that Damien Blackstone's allegedly unstable ex-wife now controlled their careers. "I'm sure many of you have questions," I continued, activating the presentation screen behind me. "So let me provide some context. 2 weeks ago, I inherited Morrison Technologies and associated assets from my great-aunt Penelope Morrison. The total inheritance was approximately $280 million. Jennifer's engagement ring clattered to the table as her hand went limp. Damien's face had progressed from pale to gray, his carefully maintained composure cracking like ice under pressure. "Some of you may remember me as Mrs. Blackstone," I said, allowing my gaze to sweep the room before settling on Damien. The emotional, unstable woman who was such an embarrassment to her successful husband that he was forced to ask her to leave for her own good. Damien finally found his voice. "Celeste, what are you?" "Ms. Morrison," I corrected sharply, using the tone I had learned from watching powerful women command rooms. "And you'll have an opportunity to ask questions after the presentation, Mr. Blackstone." The formal address hit him like a slap. For 12 years I had been sweetheart, or honey, or, toward the end, simply Celeste, delivered with varying degrees of contempt. Now I was Ms. Morrison, his employer, the person who signed his paychecks. I walked them through my vision for the firm's future: expanded family law services with a focus on representing abuse survivors, pro bono work for women escaping dangerous relationships, and a complete restructuring of the partnership hierarchy. Several junior associates looked intrigued. The senior partners appeared to be calculating their options. All current employees will retain their positions during a 90-day evaluation period, I announced. Performance reviews will be based on legal competence, ethical standards, and commitment to our new mission statement. Damien's hand trembled as he raised it. Celeste, Ms. Morrison, surely we can discuss this privately. There are aspects of our situation that... Our situation? I interrupted, feeling the full power of my transformation. Mr. Blackstone, 2 weeks ago you threw me out of our home, claiming I was too emotionally unstable to function as your wife. You told our colleagues I was having delusional episodes about fictional inheritances. You filed missing person reports suggesting I was dangerous to myself. The room was so quiet I could hear Jennifer's shallow breathing. Several staff members exchanged glances, clearly recognizing the story Damien had been telling about his mentally ill wife. It turns out, I continued, that the only delusion was your belief that the woman you discarded was actually worthless. The inheritance was completely real. The emotional instability was a response to 12 years of systematic psychological abuse. And the woman you threw away has just become the most important person in your professional life. I clicked to the final slide, which displayed the new organizational chart with my name at the top and a clear hierarchy below. Mr. Blackstone, you'll be pleased to know that your position as senior associate has been preserved. You'll report directly to the new managing partner, who will be announced next week. I trust you'll find the transition manageable. As I gathered my presentation materials, Damien stood on unsteady legs. Celeste, please, can we talk privately? I know I made mistakes, but surely we can work something out. The desperation in his voice would have broken my heart 2 weeks ago. Now it simply confirmed what Dr. Chen had taught me about abusers. They only showed remorse when they lost control. Mr. Blackstone, I said with professional courtesy, if you have concerns about your employment, I encourage you to schedule an appointment through my assistant. Human Resources will be conducting orientation sessions for all staff next week. I walked toward the conference room door, then paused and turned back. Oh, and congratulations on your engagement. I hope Ms. Walsh understands what she's signing up for. As I left Morrison & Associates that afternoon, walking through the lobby where I had once felt small and insignificant, I realized that my transformation was complete. The broken woman who had cowered in hotel rooms and questioned her own sanity had become someone Damien never believed possible. The phoenix had risen from the ashes, and everyone who had witnessed my humiliation had now witnessed my triumph. But this wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. Coming up next, you'll see 2 more stories we handpicked just for you. If this one struck a chord, you're going to love what's next. Tap to keep the journey going.